I've noticed that my right wing of council are the very good ones when it comes to early attendance, and here you are at 100% today. So my left wing, just a message. Maybe next week 2 weeks I can say the opposite. So it's the perhaps. In any event, with that subtle reminder, the following with regards to roll call. All members are present except. Okay, very good. I see Councillor. The clerk tells me Mayor Crombie, Councillor Demerla, Councillor Downey is absent, Councillor Fortini, and all the rest are in attendance. Very good. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes, the January 10 council meeting. It's been moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. Show of hands. All those in favour? That is carried. And the January 31st, 2019 Regional Council meeting. Any questions? It has been moved by Councillor Fonseca. It has been seconded by Councillor Kovac. All those in favour? That is carried. Approval of the agenda. Public announcements sponsored by a member of council. No, sorry.
Approval of agenda, you need to go through.
Oh, and sorry, let me go through, yes, thank you. Having done that, the agenda for the February 14th, 2019 Regional Council meeting include a communication from Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario regarding the municipal environmental assessment reform to be dealt with under items related to public works, and further that the agenda include an in-camera item relating to a personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including a municipal employee, and finally, and further that the agenda for the February 14th, 2019 Regional Council meeting be approved as amended, and that was moved by Councillors Fonseca and Kovacs, and that is carried. Thank you. Public announcements sponsored by a member. Are there any? Seeing none. Consent agenda. As you see, we're already dealing with items 8.1, 2, and 3 with staff presentations, so that brings me to 9. Do I have consent on item 9.1? Item 9.2. We have consent item 9.3. Consent item 9.4. Councillor Kovacs, Councillor Kovacs, we've asked to hold item 9.4. Thank you. Item 10.1, communications. 10.2. We have consent. 10.3. 10.4. Moving to items related to enterprise programs, item 11.1. Hold. Thank you, Councillor Sado. And 11.2 as well, Councillor Sado. Very good. On to item 11.3. Is there consent? Yes. 11.4. 11.5. That brings us to communications. We do require direction on 12.1, so that will be held. Items related to public works. Item 13.1. Do I have consent? Yes. 13.2. Hold on 13.2. Thank you, Councillor Raz. 13.3. 13.4, which brings us to communications. Item 14.1. 14.2. 14.3. Again, I have consent. And item 14.4 was the letter regarding Residential and Civil Construction Alliance. And we can hold that? Or we can deal with it on consent? Very good. I have consent for 14.4 as well. Very good. 15 brings us no items under health, items related to health. Takes us to 17. First item I have 17.1, update on refugee and refugee claimant issue. Do I have consent? Yes. Takes us to notices, and we'll deal with that for the rest of the agenda. So that has straightened that out for us, which brings me now to the main agenda. Oh, of course, a vote on the consent agenda. All those in favor of the consent agenda, and I need you to push your buttons. And that vote has been carried. Thank you. So let's get to work. Item 8.1, staff presentations, recent calls for the elimination of water and wastewater development charges. A presentation by Stephen Van Afwagen, Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer. Stephen, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chair and members of Council.
Today I'm going to provide a presentation to update Council on the implications of a C.D. Howe report calling for the elimination of water and wastewater development charges. In 2018, C.D. Howe released a paper called Hosing Homebuyers: Why Cities Should Not Pay for Water and Wastewater Infrastructure with Development Charges. It is not uncommon for the C.D. Howe to author reports which make bold and provocative recommendations related to municipal finance. You may be wondering, what is different this time? The author of this report is Ben Dacus, and he is now with the current provincial government in Premier Ford's office. And we believe that his views will have significant influence over provincial policy development. The C.D. Howe report makes a number of assertions, including that housing would be more affordable if there were no water and wastewater DCs, that the DC costs are passed on to home buyers, that a utility rate model relying on user fees to charge full costs of growth infrastructure is preferable, and that water and wastewater utilities should be consolidated to achieve economies of scale and open the door to privatization. So I'm going to provide a brief history about the rise in DCs. So it is true that DCs have risen over the past decade. However, I believe it is important that we understand the root causes of rising DCs. In the 1950s and 60s, the province built and senior levels of government funded water and wastewater systems. In Peel, the systems were built to meet a population of approximately 1 million. In post-1980, responsibility funding was shifted primarily to growth and a little bit to the existing ratepayers. In Peel, the excess capacity that was provided through provincial investments was fully used by the early 2000s. The excess capacity and previous provincial funding kept the DC rates low. To support provincial mandated population growth to 2031 and beyond, the region has borrowed $1.4 billion to ensure that the infrastructure is in place prior to development. The region took on this risk. Debt financing costs place additional pressures on the development charge rates. Provincial legislative changes, such as environmental, where large bridge spans are now required to protect environmentally sensitive areas, and post-Walkerton requirements added significant costs. Another significant contributor to rising water and wastewater DCs is the fact that growth is increasingly further from the lake. Peel is not alone in recognizing the importance of DCs to finance growth infrastructure. Last month, the Institute of Municipal Finance and Governance released a report concluding that DCs are in fact the right tool to recover growth-related capital costs. The Fraser Institute states that the fundamentals of housing prices relate to population growth, income growth, housing supply, and interest rates. They make no mention of development charges or government fees. AMO reports that DCs represent only a small portion of the cost of a new home. The Pembina Institute reports that DC increases account for only a small fraction of the increase in house prices. The Altus group reports that the largest government-imposed fee for new home buyers is HST and land transfer taxes. Our Watson and Associates raised concern about the implication of existing homeowners who are already stretched to maintain their homes. Any significant increase in taxes and water rates would be devastating for many. There is no evidence to suggest that reducing DCs will improve housing affordability or supply. The Altus study, which was commissioned by Build, did a thorough analysis of government fees related to new homes. In this study, Altus acknowledges that the development charges are paid by developers, not by homeowners. However, the HST and land transfer taxes are paid by homeowners. These taxes are general revenues for the provincial and federal governments. Unlike DCs, they do not cover the cost of servicing new development. So it begs the question, why are we focused on DCs, a municipal cost recovery tool? Municipalities, we are creatures of the province, and outside of Toronto, we have limited revenue tools. Council has a long-established principle that growth should pay for growth. A 2010 study conducted by Watson and Associates on behalf of Milton revealed that growth only covers about 80% of the cost of growth. The remainder is subsidized by our ratepayers. The recently approved 2019 10-year capital plan included $414 million of growth infrastructure, which will be financed from existing ratepayers. This equates to about 4% of our net tax levy. Any further reduction in development charges would be forced upon existing ratepayers. So what does this mean for Peel? If the province were to adopt the C.D. Howe recommendations, first, we have outstanding debt of $1.4 billion associated with past infrastructure investments to support future growth. Additional water and wastewater infrastructure investments of $7.5 billion will be required to support growth all the way to 2041. As reported to Council on January 10th, Peel needs to increase reserve contributions to raise an additional $1.6 billion to maintain existing infrastructure in a state of good repair over the next 20 years. Financing both growth and state of good repair costs through water rates will be unaffordable for many. Without a sustainable source of financing, Peel will be challenged to continue to service land for growth, constraining supply and leading to higher, not lower, house prices. Staff modeling shows that if the province were to eliminate water and wastewater DCs and require the cost to be passed on to the existing ratepayers, the impact would be significant. In fact, in the first year alone, rates would increase by an average of 73%, rising even more in subsequent years. This slide shows the impact on a variety of Peel's water customers. Housing would become less affordable for existing ratepayers. The cost of doing business would rise, and the public sector agencies will face significant increases as well. In 2014, Peel commissioned the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis to assess the economic impact of Peel's water and wastewater growth-related infrastructure investments. The study reveals that for every dollar in municipal revenue generated by the region's upcoming water and wastewater infrastructure investment, the provincial government would generate additional revenue in the range of $1.59 to $1.77. The federal government would benefit with additional revenues in the range of $1.26 to $1.50. So adopting C.D. Howe's recommendation would also put provincial and federal revenues at risk. Eliminating DCs would transfer the cost of growth to existing ratepayers, would put funding of municipal asset management plans at risk, would create opposition to growth, and would result in significantly higher water and wastewater rates. Development charges is the most equitable way to pay for growth costs. It would be unfair to existing ratepayers to further subsidize the cost of growth. There is no evidence that suggests that DC cost savings would be passed from developers to home buyers. Housing would be less affordable for low-income families and seniors. The cost for business would rise. In summary, the current DC system works, should be expanded, not reduced. Growth really should pay for growth. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. And there are questions. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. I really don't have a question, but I just have some comments, if that's okay.
Please.
First of all, I'm really disappointed to see this coming from the province, because from your presentation, Stephen, and I read the a memo that was given to us, sent to us from the planning department, and one of the things that they mentioned in there was exactly this. I don't think, when I look at this, it's very developer friendly, and throughout your presentation, what I heard and what resonated with me is the fact that the developers will get off and the ratepayers will have to pick up the cost. So I have a real problem with that, and I'm actually quite surprised that the province would be looking at this. I think that there are ways to have housing development move forward, and some of those ways would be streamlining the process and just making things move a little quicker that way. But to look at, to say, let's cut the DC or eliminate the DC, I certainly can't support that, because I can't support passing that on to my homeowners. So not sure what we do with this, but those are my thoughts, and that would be, and I will be supporting the staff's recommendation when it does come forward, and I would be happy to move that recommendation at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I would like to second what Councillor Groves had said, but it's interesting. You know, a lot of people don't realize that C.D. Howe was responsible for the St. Lawrence Seaway, the 401 and different things were projects under him. But what's really unique, he's the one that brought water into Malton through Peel for Avro. C.D. Howe did that, and he also helped the Toronto Township at the time with Harold Ship's first development, plan a subdivision. It was really the first DCs on shared cost. And it's funny that this organization now is calling it out. It's just history. Look it up. It's right there. But here's where I'm coming back at is, unfortunately, C.D. Howe definitely didn't talk to Peel. We have a good relationship with the development industry. In fact, we're carrying their costs to help them get where they need to go. So to me, I've always said development charges is a cost sharing for new development through the development, how it's shared out. It's interesting you asked that after the bill that was brought forward, and I can't remember if it was Bill 69 or what it was, that handcuffed municipalities and development agreements with developers. So to me is, I don't buy with what's recommendation here. I don't think it's been well enough researched and really understand. One of the leaders in development in Peel, especially with Peel, not understanding our situation. So it's good to have that conversation, but I'm going to tell you, as Amo said, it's 5 to 7%. I really like to know what that really is, especially in Caledon, is unique. As my councillors will know, there's homes that have gone up for sale. They put a few out just to see where the market is. They sell fast. They add another 30,000 and another 50,000 because they know the market will bear it. The reason why it's unaffordable is the lack of competition in the marketplace and the lack of homes being on the market. I can tell you, when there's a slow up, that's when reality comes back into place and they're still making money. So to me, it's good. We received the report, but I got to tell you, unfortunately, C.D. Howe didn't look at the Peel model.
Well said. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Stephen. I guess the City of Mississauga had an opportunity to meet with our MPPs and MPs a few weeks ago, and it was organized by Mayor Crombie's office. I think there was a lack of understanding about the value that DCs bring and also our inability to raise other funds. So the recommendation to write from the chair to our local area MPPs, I think, is going to be really important. I also think everybody here at the table needs to take every opportunity they have with when speaking to their MPPs to talk about the value of DCs. At the end of the day, not only are utility rates going to increase by an astronomical amount, but also property taxes, generally speaking, I think it was 8%. We also are challenged to adopt our growth plans. So how can we plan for growth and pay for growth on the backs of the property taxpayers that are already here? It's inherently unfair. So whatever we can do to get out in front of this, I think would be beneficial. I'm not even too sure that a letter may be too passive for me. I think maybe we need to organize a meeting with some policy advisors or the minister's office on this, and the minister should be well aware of what those challenges are. So I don't think we can be too complacent about this. We need to be aggressively fighting to maintain those DCs. And at the end of the rate, having spoken to a number of developers over recent weeks, they said it's the market that's going to drive price. It's not the DCs. And if the DCs are only 5 to 7% cost of a new home, let's look at the other 95% to see where they can cut costs. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good presentation. And as I read through the AMO position and also the position of, what's your organization? The municipal finance officers. I do think, obviously we need to support both of those positions. And I agree with Councillor Raz that, I don't think sending a letter is doing enough. I think the meetings have to be held. And the issues stress that, we can hold back development. And there's basically C.D. Howe saying, in order to encourage development, we should reduce development charges. It's going to work the opposite way. And that's just the reality. And I think the province and most of the MPs really do not understand development. They don't understand development charges. They don't understand intensification, the growth plan. You know, they pass this legislation and they don't see the impact because they don't have to deal with it like we do. So the understanding isn't there. You know, I think back over the years, the number of times that previous governments, and it's been all parties, have listened to the developers over the municipalities and have cut back on what we could charge in development charges. You know, when I first came on council, and you, Nando, we had the old levies and everything was paid for. And then they cut it back that we could only charge 90% for recreation and parks and it's other things. Then they said if you don't have something like a bike lane or whatever service, you can't put it in your development charges bylaws. So little by little, the development charges have been really, really dug away at until we really right now still have a very bare bones. And every time we do the review, the developers are here saying, cut this, reduce that, and we just can't do it anymore. I think showing over the years how much we have lost in development charges here in Peel, and those numbers we have, would go a long way to say to our MPPs, you know, since whatever year, even over the last 10, 15 years, which I guess would be 3 reviews of the DCs, this is how much money provincial governments have cut away from the development charges had we stayed at the same program that we had 15 years ago or even 20 years ago. And this is what the impact has been on the region of Peel. It's a huge impact, and you know, I think we need to give as much of that history as possible. Did sorry, I keep forgetting the name of your organization, Finance Officers Association. Did you have anyone else do a study that would combat the CD Howe?
So certainly, the most recent study that was released was through the Institute of Municipal Finance and Governance. It works out of the University of Toronto. Okay. And they had a PhD fellow write the report, and it really looks at the issue of equity. If the DCs were transferred on to existing ratepayers, the extent to which existing ratepayers would have to subsidize that future growth. So that was independently commissioned. A series of reports from Pembina Institute that talked about DCs don't really drive the increase in prices. So there's a variety of research that's out there. We know from Ottawa, where they actually waived DCs in one neighborhood to encourage more development, residential development in that neighborhood. The prices pre-imposed and the price to adjacent neighborhoods stayed the same. They didn't come down when they removed the DCs. So that would suggest that only the developers made more money in that scenario, or in the longer term, the landowners would make more money. It's not really passed on to the homeowners.
So I think those are things that we should be pointing out in whatever we send to the province as well. And I mean, in Peel and in Mississauga, we've always had a growth pays for itself philosophy. And that's why we've had DCs. We had DCs levies before we had DCs with the big 3 developers. We know that growth, even with the DCs, does not pay for itself, but at least it pays for a good portion of itself. And it's just always been the philosophy that someone buying a home should be contributing towards the cost of the services that are going to go towards that home, especially the water, wastewater services, because those are the big dollar items that we need to pay for, and existing residents should not have to pick up the tab. And, you know, developers have argued that too, where one of them comes in, if there's 3 or 4 developers coming into a subdivision, they don't want to be the first one in to pay for everything, and they've been before us saying, well, everybody should share in it. You know, that these are the new ones coming in. The new one coming in should pay for it. So let's use a bit of their philosophy back against them on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you. Years ago, during the Harris government years, they decided to dump a whole lot of big services on the property tax base. So all of public housing, ambulance, public health, welfare, and the administration costs. And the region started up a public relations program I think they labeled the pamphlets behind the 8 Ball, and they started mailing them out to every resident in Peel to explain to them the attack on the property tax base at that time. And it was so successful, we had a cabinet minister sit right there and ask us to please stop. Extraordinary. And in hindsight, we made a mistake. We did stop. What we should have said, sure, we'll stop for 6 months, and then we're going to stoke it up again if you don't fix it. So I would request that staff, Mr. Chairman, dust off behind the 8 Ball and let council know what that was all about, because I think we're going to need it again. Thank you.
Well said and agreed. Councillor Demerla.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Sinclair just said something that I was wanting to raise, which is exactly that the narrative in the public domain that the Ford government is going with is DC, development charges, reduce house prices. And we have to go to the public with the real narrative, which is there is no free lunch. Not only will this not reduce house costs, but it'll increase your property taxes. I think it's really important that we win this war, the public relations war, not just with the ministers and with the Premier's office, but in the public domain. We really need a good campaign so that the homeowners and the taxpayers really understand that what this is going to do is essentially pass the burden on in the form of property taxes. It's an easy narrative, but it has to be explained.
Thank you. Councillor Crombie, Mayor Crombie, sorry, Mayor Crombie.
So I'm not going to repeat what everyone has said because they've said it so eloquently, and obviously I agree. I think this is another way of downloading costs onto the municipality. So how do we raise this issue? And maybe we need to discuss the ways we can do that in the PR campaign that we should launch. And we're talking about storming the barracks over here. So I don't know if the pre-budget submissions are completed at the province. Is that an opportunity for us to appear before Budget Committee and make our case with respect to all development charges? Would that be maybe the mayors could appear, and yourself as well, Stephen, representing your organization, the Finance Officers Association. Obviously, we can write letters, but I think we need to be present, not only meetings with them. Are you familiar with whether or not the pre-budgets are done?
Through the chair, maybe we can just, through the housing consultation process, both AMO and the Municipal Finance Officers Association, as well as the Ontario Regional Single Chair Treasurers Group, which I am currently the chair of, we have met in consultations with ministry staff, and we've had a joint session with BUILD late last month as well. With the province and looking at, and so we've raised these issues at that table already, but I think it's now needs to be in that political environment, so that that was more around the housing supply, both housing supply consultation and the elimination of water, wastewater DCs from a CDHL perspective. They're interrelated. Right. We're using the housing crisis to leverage this as an opportunity. I'm not sure the timing of the provincial consultations, but if they're still, I think the budget consultations may be complete already.
They're complete? They're completed?
I think so.
Well, if I may offer, Mayor Brown and I are at the large urban mayors meeting of AMO tomorrow in Guelph. And so perhaps this is an issue we can raise and alert the other mayors, and perhaps we could do a joint submission on behalf of large urban mayors of Ontario, the LUMCO organization. We speak in one unified voice. Often there's more impact that way. So if enough of these come forward, but as well meet with ministers, speak to the Premier however we can. It's not only the DCs on water and wastewater, they're looking at eliminating DCs generally, so it's not just this specific issue, it's more broadly misunderstood by the representatives of the provincial government.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll
Please to support
determine
any
our
way I
strategy.
can.
Yes, we can, we will, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just echo everything that's been said, but an example of where the provincial government put out a very controversial bill, Bill 66, and there was whatever the strategy was, with Bill 66 to act as counselors, and Councillor Ross said, and Councillor Sato and Councillor Sinclair and the mayor. That strategy worked extremely well. It was done very succinctly. It was done through the conservation authorities, and they pulled back. They heard loud and clear. The government pulled back and heard loud and clear that this was not acceptable. And I think with that strategy, there were, I think, maybe five key succinct points. I know at the TRCA we heard, and we had the opportunity to give input, but there was 5 key succinct points that everybody could be brought on board with, whether they were members of the public, ratepayers groups, organizations, mayors, chairs, they were able, and councillors were able to come together and do that. But that strategy, I think, worked really well, and perhaps through LUMCO or through other organizations. But we acted really quickly on that and all pulled together, and the results was they pulled back and took out Section 10. I believe it was Section 10 from Bill 66. So I would suggest following that very active strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, I think it was Councillor Sinclair who said that it was raising attention to residents that really caused the government to say, please stop, in a previous government. And so I think that campaign of awareness is important. And I agree with the assessment that you're never going to see DC cost savings pass on to homeowners. And that spin needs to be debunked. I'm not sure a pre-budget submission ever actually gets picked up in the media, and that's done. And so I think a quiet letter probably is not going to have the type of pushback you want. I think with Schedule 10 and Bill 66, it was in the media. That's why it had to be put to bed and walked back. When the whole issue of whether the Greenbelt would be touched in the provincial campaign, it only got walked back because it was in the media. And so I think whether it's the Government Relations Committee or we have a broader discussion, knowing that this would be a mistake, we have to find a way to rally some noise around that. And I would wholeheartedly agree that would be the right approach.
Thank you. Great conversation. I might add, normally I'm so proud of my council colleagues. I'm a little disappointed today because you're normally so compassionate. None of you have said the fundamental thing. Isn't it just a human tragedy that in 30 years, developers haven't been able to build in Peel and make billions of dollars? Isn't that tragic? Nobody cares that for 30 years we haven't added 20,000 people a year. We've gotten up to almost 2 million people, and you know, they own the fancy homes, the fancy cars. It's been dreadful for them under the regime that we have now. So maybe something needs to be done. In fact, why don't we just put them out of their misery and freeze all development? And they'll thank us for that, I'm sure. So that's my first thought. My second thought is, and it's been brought up before, and I think Councillor Sinclair, you know, back in the day, a lot of homes in Mississauga were 100-foot lots. Do you know why we went to 75s, 50s? It was the development industry saying land's too expensive, so keep reducing. Mayor McCallum would bring this up all the time. What did it get us? The 30-foot lots are millions of dollars now, too. They passed on the savings to who? I love Mayor Thompson's comment. It happens all the time. It happened in my ward all the time. Put up the sale sign, things are going well. Overnight, the things went up $30,000. Your costs haven't changed. What have you passed on to anybody? This is a joke. The final point that I will make, and I brought it up with the Minister Clark as well, I'm getting a little fed up with this government that thinks sound financial policy is simply robbing Peter to pay Paul. One of the great recent examples is, university kids, don't worry, I'm reducing your tuition 10%. Then he turned around, looked at me, administrative building, say, administrators, fine 10%. Well, that's not a true savings. So I'm just disgusted by the file. If you talk privately to land developers, they'll tell you, okay, we've made our point. Can we move on and can we have business as usual? Or as I said, we'll put them out of their misery and you local folk just won't issue building permits anymore. And that'll put them out of their misery, and I hope they'll thank us. Those are my thoughts. To our CEO, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, picking up on the discussion around the table, I'm wondering if council would it be amenable to adjusting the second recommendation in the report to give staff direction to work with the chair on a public campaign on this, so we can put together the information, provide 3 or 4 points, but also take it further to a public campaign through the chair's office. Okay, thanks.
Further on that, I have Councillors Demerla and Mayor Brown. Councillor Demerla?
I was just going to say, while we're at it, we may as well ask for 100%, the ability to charge 100% of the DCs.
Thank you. A good thought. Mayor Brown?
And maybe you could update council on what that public campaign could look like and what are our options. And so whether it's, if there's a mailing that's already going out, a little bit of an information piece, if there are regional buildings where that information could be put out, the more noise that you could generate and envision would be better. And I think, given the fact there's been 2 other issues where the government has been vulnerable on the fact of appearing too close to developers, this would be something that they would want to put to bed quickly if there was noise around it. And so I did just stress if you could give us options for a campaign that would be less quiet, wouldn't be quiet.
Mayor Thompson?
And I do remember what Councillor Sinclair said, behind the 8 ball is very good, but we now have social media and a lot of other things here that we can reach out. And I think it's educating the public what's important here to Peel and what we're about and what we've tried to do to be the stewards. So I think we have to toot our own horn and give everybody confidence that we know what we're doing. So I agree with everything that's been said, but I think that's what we really need to show, that state, this is what we've been doing, how we need to improve to take it off. Your property taxes are too high. Here's another way we can save money. So put the pressure back that they wish they never asked the question.
Well said. With that, I have the following motion for me that we've made an amendment to, moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Mayor Thompson, that the position of the Municipal Finance Officers Association, the Ontario Regional and Single Tier Treasurers, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario opposing the elimination of water and wastewater infrastructure costs by development charges be adopted, and further that the Regional Chair write on behalf of Regional Council to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Housing, the Premier of Ontario, local MPPs, and local municipalities to convey the region's position, and further commence a public campaign about the region's position, and finally, that staff be directed to report back on this public campaign. You've heard the motion. Are there any other speakers? If not, I will ask you to vote by pushing your buttons at this time. And that is carried unanimously. Well done. Good conversation. Thank you for the presentation. Next up, we have item 8.2, Service Delivery Options for TransHelp Passengers Assistant Program, presentation by Stephen Fanton, Director of TransHelp. And as Stephen's coming up, a shout out to Councillor Vincente, who spent the better part of a morning with me and staff going over this file and just brought a marvelous perspective to it. So thank you for the time you've taken on the file, Councillor Vincente. Staff, please proceed.
Good morning. Again, my name is Stephen Fanton, and I'm the director here leading the region's TransHelp service. Alongside me today is David Margiotta, who's also part of the TransHelp leadership team. The Passenger Assistance Program, and I'll refer to it frequently as a program here on in, has a 10-year history here at the region. The program provides an attendant on board vehicles to help passengers as needed during their travel. Now, just for a little bit of context for everyone, this program is a little bit different than our traditional TransHelp program. In our traditional service, if a passenger requires a support person for any reason, such as at risk of wandering, or if they have behavioral risks that puts other people on the bus at risk, that person will require a support person, and that passenger is required to provide their own support person. However, in the Passenger Assistance Program, that support person is provided to them. They don't have to provide it on their own. So that's really the fundamental difference that I really want to make sure that everyone understood up front. The program was initiated in 2009 as a pilot to allow residents with cognitive disabilities the ability to travel to and from day programs. Now, back in 2009, cognitive disabilities were not recognized as a barrier to travel under the AODA. So at that point in time, these passengers were not eligible for TransHelp. When I scan across the GTA, there are no other transit agencies that offer this type of service. So whether it be MyWay, Brampton Transit, TTC, or other specialized transit agencies such as Wheel-Trans, These are public transit agencies that simply take passengers to and from their location. So when the program started 10 years ago, this is really the only form of public transportation that was available to these types of passengers. However, this changed in 2017 as the AODA expanded its eligibility requirements to not only include physical disabilities, which is what was permitted at that point in time, but it was expanded to include cognitive disabilities as well. So with that in mind, it was anticipated that after 2017, passengers that were part of this program could actually move over to TransHelp. So with that in mind, Council directed staff in 2016 to hold the program at the level that it was at back then and come back to Council, which we are doing today, to review future options that we can do with the program. And at that point in time, there was about 128 passengers that were enrolled. So that brings us to where we are today. Today, we have 2 delivery partners that provide this service across the region. In Mississauga and Brampton, the program is being delivered by Canes Community Services, and I'll refer to them as Canes here on in. The region has an agreement with Canes to continue to deliver the service until June 30th of this year at the very latest, after which point in time Canes no longer wishes to be the service provider for this specific service. And allow me to explain why. The client profile that Canes services today are typically over the age of 65 years of age. When we look at the passenger profile for people in this program, the age ranges from 26 up to 65. So it's clear that the client profiles do not match, hence the reason why Canes no longer wishes to be the delivery partner for this specific service. Moving on to Caledon. In Caledon, this program is being delivered by Caledon Community Services, or CCS, for those of you that are aware of them. So today, we will be presenting options for the future of the program, and we're hoping to get direction today from Council so we can effectively begin our transition for that June 30th date. Ideally, we are looking for one decision for the entire program that spans across all 3 local municipalities to make sure we offer one consistent service across the entire region. In the meantime, staff have been working closely with the various agencies that these passengers are associated with to see who can make an easy transition to TransHelp. Although these passengers have cognitive disabilities, not all of them require a support person. So for this subset of individuals, the transition to TransHelp should be that much easier. Up until this point in time, right now, there are 24 passengers that have transitioned over to TransHelp or are in the midst of doing the paperwork but will transfer over. So at this point in time, there's about 80 remaining passengers that are enrolled. And that number changes on a daily basis, but it's about 80 right now. But before I get into the options, let me share with you a couple other data points that are worthwhile mentioning. First, as a result of the AODA changes in 2017, 20% of the TransHelp passenger base has a cognitive disability. In several of these cases, they have similar disabilities to those people that are part of the passenger assistance program today. Secondly, approximately 2,000 TransHelp passengers today both require and provide their own support person in order to travel. Again, under the passenger assistance program, that support person is provided to them. So as you can see, currently, there are 2 different levels of service within the region for residents that have similar barriers to travel. So that leads us into the options where we're at today, I'll get into a bit more detail in the upcoming slide. The first option is to continue the program for existing passengers and let the program shrink over time simply through natural attrition. Option number 2 is to transfer all the passengers to our normal TransHelp service and essentially end the passenger assistance program. In some cases, the transition will be easier, specifically for those that don't require a support person today. But for those passengers that do require a support person, under this option, they will need to provide their own, similar to the other 2,000 TransHelp passengers that do it today. And the third and final option that we'll evaluate is to grow the program to meet the needs of all Peel residents that require this type of service. Here you'll see all 3 options that I mentioned in the last slide, along with the associated impacts of each. We've also reviewed this with our advisory committee and received their support for the ultimate recommendation as well. Under the first option, where the program continues for existing passengers, there's really no change for passengers that are enrolled in the program today. However, as I mentioned earlier, inequality would still continue to exist, as we would have a continuation of having 2 different levels of service within the region. Also, there are no other agencies that we are currently aware of today that are ready, willing, and able to take on this service. So I expect that we would find some difficulty trying to find a delivery partner willing and able to deliver the service in Mississauga and Brampton once Cairns removes itself from the service. Thirdly, given the small size of the operation, again, it's 80 passengers today, which will decline over time through natural attrition, the opportunities to find more efficiencies in order to deliver the service that much cheaper are going to be limited. And lastly, the natural attrition that I referred to before could take several years. Again, the youngest passenger in the program today is 26 years of age, and the oldest is 65. So under this option, the region would have a role in this service for several years, perhaps spanning over several decades. Moving on to option number 2. This is the option where we take the 80 passengers and we transfer them to our TransHelp service, and we essentially end the program. And this is the recommended option for Council to consider today. Of utmost importance here, there's equality for our passengers, as there's one level of service consistent for all residents. Also, by integrating this smaller service of 80 passengers into our larger TransHelp service of 10,000 passengers, there's opportunities to find more efficiencies as we begin to merge some of the trips together, and at the same time, offer a better level of service. If you recall back a few weeks ago when Jeanette presented our budget presentation, 88% of TransHelp passengers today are satisfied with the level of service that they receive. And lastly, this option is consistent with our other GTA transit partners, which avoids confusion for our passengers, especially as they travel crossing local boundaries. Having said all that, this option also does result in hardship for our passengers and their families, specifically those that require a support person to enable them to travel. But again, this is very similar to the 2,000 TransHelp residents that provide their own passengers or that provide their own support person today. And as a result of this hardship, this does create somewhat of a reputational risk for the region as well. This moves us to our third and our final option, where the program is actually expanded to meet all the needs of Peel residents that require this type of support. And essentially, I see two things happening under this scenario. First, the 2,000 TransHelp passengers that provide their own support person today would now have one provided to them. The second thing that will likely happen is there's a good chance that there could be an influx of new passengers that would consider TransHelp as being a travel option now that a support person is being provided. So under this third and final option, this definitely meets the needs of residents that require this form of service. But having said that, the inconsistency and inequality would still continue to exist by having two different levels of service. Also, over and above that, the financial impact of option number 3 is quite substantial. I would say that the incremental cost on an annual basis would well be in excess of $15 million over and above what we're paying for today, and that number will grow depending on how many new passengers actually enroll into TransHelp. So as I step back after reviewing all 3 options, as I mentioned earlier, option number 2, in which all 80 passengers transfer over to TransHelp and the program be ended, is a recommended option for Council to consider today. Staff has spent a considerable amount of time reviewing these options, and by no means are any of these options perfect. They all come along with their drawbacks. But having said that, the consistency of having one level of service is really paramount here, and is a fundamental reason that drove us to the recommendation that we're bringing forth today. And understanding the impact of people's lives that this would have, the staff would work closely with each one of the passengers under this option to make sure that we can make the transition as smooth as possible to minimize the impacts to people's personal lives. And that concludes the presentation today. Thank you for your time, and open up for questions.
Well done, Stephen, and well explained. A very tough issue. Mayor Thompson.
So here I'm going to throw a wrench at you, and then yes, I come from Caledon, and we do have a good support network, but it's not near enough. I think we're even running at a deficit of 75,000, and maybe Councillor Downey, who sits on the board, could firm that up a little bit better. Where I'm coming is with your number 2, understanding where you're wanting to go. I have a hard time with that $800K you're going to save. I have in past tells me that just doesn't happen. My reality is we've approved a budget. This is a savings. Is there any way we can make a hybrid option to make the transition from 1 to 2? Because there's certain people that will need, especially with special needs. Some people only know the person that they're with. To have a stranger deal with them is not a good thing. And I'm going to say we're saving $800K. I'd rather if I could see it as a 0, because this is about serving our community. And we've even developed a program, even with our golf tournament last year, working with Raising the Roof, developing a home for adults with disabilities, you know, that don't have those support programs. I can see as a community, we're becoming more inclusive all the time. To me, the way this sits with number 2 doesn't serve the region's goals of being inclusive. Grow the program, 15 million, that, to me, that just makes me weak at the knees right now. But what I'm going to say is there any way that there's a bigger need out there? And what I'm just saying is, even if we split the cost 50-50 to have a support person, if someone's willing to have somebody, I know we have people that work with it, but even have a support person on that bus. For the people that aren't needing that special need, you know, it's similar to what we do with transit. Everybody pays a base fee to have that person or book that person. I still think there's a need for this, and to shut it off cold turkey, I'm just wondering, have you factored looking at a hybrid option from 1 and 2? I guess was my first question.
Through the chair, not explicitly, we haven't, but the issue, or the concern, or the thing we'd have to wrestle with, I wouldn't call it an issue, is again, having that 2 levels of service.
I know.
In which there are passengers that want a support person today, that need one that we are not servicing today because we've essentially capped the program at the current levels that they were at. So it really boils down to council's view is, you know, if we're willing to live with having 2 levels of service, then we can definitely go back and evaluate that as a hybrid option. We can definitely do that. But again, the biggest thing that led us to option number 2 is having that 1 level of service. So we were trying to avoid having a hybrid solution, to be honest with you, which is kind of where we're at today. We do have a hybrid today.
I understand, but I'm going to tell you, this isn't going to get any easier. We're all living longer. Yes, we're living longer, but we're going to have more disabilities as we get older. And it's about people still having quality of life, being able to move around versus being secluded. And with today's technology, all I'm going to say is, I understand with your recommendation with 2, but I'm really saying, I don't know, because it may sound good today, but where are we going to be 3 years from now? You'll be coming back with a council report knowing we need needs, we have this, especially with seniors. And today you may be fine, but as my counselor said beside me here, it's the yardstick rule. How many inches have you got left at our age?
Right. Well, so I would say, thank you, through the chair. So today, I would say that we are operating with a hybrid solution today.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding the question properly, can we continue with a larger hybrid solution? The one issue that we could have, that we currently have actually today, is that even under the AODA, we can't necessarily discriminate in terms of who gets what level of service. And right now, indirectly, we are discriminating. So under that hybrid solution, if we want to make it even more hybrid, that risk is more paramount than it is today.
Well, like even a subsidized cost, that's all I'm saying to make that transition, because I got news. To go with 2, I understand. And I would expect nothing else but how the report is written and how you've brought it to us. I get it. Well, what I'm going to say is I just can't see this being a long-term solution, the way it sits with what we're proposing. I'm just trying to think ahead.
Yeah, no.
And then what I'm just saying is, versus a fully, cost, is there any way that we can look at a hybrid solution, is where I guess is coming with a subsidized cost, of a person to help, and that's what I'm just saying. And I know that wasn't asked of you, we didn't ask of you of that, and I'm just saying, is that a possibility?
Yeah, through the chair, today the cost is already subsidized today. To run the passenger assistant program, it's roughly 2 times the cost of our traditional service. And so it's, I'm going to call it 90-95% subsidized already today.
Well, where I'm looking at is a 50-50 cost. But
less subsidized.
Yeah, less subsidized. We'll cover half the cost of the person versus paying the full rate that we were doing before. And if you look at it, you're still saving money.
Through the chair, we can look at that option. Again, it'd be two different levels of service. There may be some discriminatory. The other thing we'd have to think through more than anything too is that might be you may think that's a hybrid between 1 and 2, but it's actually a hybrid probably more between 2 and 3. And with three, we might get that many more people, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, that would want to join the program, but we might be inching closer to that $15 million plus versus the 800,000.
Well-
And again, not a bad thing, just want to be transparent and eyes open as we.
I get that, and I think maybe that's the reality, is that's what we're facing. We're growing to 2 million people, and there's going to be more demands on the system versus less. And that's why I'm just having a hard time saying 800K, I don't know. If you can tell me zero, I believe it. You know, just looking, not today, but even next year.
Yeah.
you know.
Perhaps I can call on the commissioner to speak to that point right now.
Thank you. Through the chair, so I just want to clarify. So for the overall TransHelp program is growing by, is it about 10% a year? 10% a year. So if we just set this issue aside, so from a sustainability issue, the TransHelp program is 10% a year in budget increase, and we don't see that end in sight anytime soon with an aging and a growing population. So we have overall issues where we're trying to continue to provide the best service we can within a reasonable cost. So what I'm hearing is to take those 80 people, and are you looking at just subsidizing? So we're not going to have a service delivery agent. So you're saying they would, like the other TransHelp passengers, bring their own attendant, and we would help cost share that attendant for just those 80? Or are you saying for the 2,000 as well as the 80 and everyone else who comes in the future? Because that 800,000 is just based on what we pay those service delivery partners now for the program.
Where I was coming was with the 80, you know, before we were providing that cost share is if you still want it, you're going to pay 50% of the cost, but we will still provide it for you. That's all I'm just saying is make that transition, because I do not think moving a lot of seniors over time or moving people with disabilities, you don't know what could happen to anybody. Your life changes. How do you continue on? And all I'm going to say is I understand personally, business-wise, number 2 makes sense. The reality tells me, and probably, as you said, it's probably closer to 3 than it is to 1, possibly. But what I'm going to say is, maybe we do the cold turkey and cut it now and move forward. But I got a feeling that sooner or later, if we don't figure out how to make that work, option 3 is going to come back and glare us in the face, even as demands and even as you can see is where society's going. If we want inclusive societies, number 2 isn't inclusive, 3 is, but at what cost? So that's where I'm really wrestling with. I'm really having a hard time making a decision on this report, and this is where I'm saying is, business-wise, it makes perfect sense, but my heart tells me something different, and that's where I'm really wrestling with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Stephen. In your remarks, you talked about how you have been working with those other delivery agencies to try to reduce the number down. So you've already implemented a sort of a hybrid approach to trying to identify which clients can use TransHelp as it is. In staff's opinion, what is the capacity of families to be able to provide a support person where it's needed, whether it's a family member or to be able to pay for someone to accompany a person who is using TransHelp?
Through the chair, well, the actions that we're taking today, working with the agencies, we're actually trying to undo the hybrid. We're actually trying to remove them from a 2 level over to 1. So the hybrid is the 2 levels of service that we're trying to undo. In terms of the ability of families to be able to fund their own support person that they could actually choose, I'd be guessing, to be honest with you. I don't, we haven't done any studies or to assess who can do what. I can't tell you that 2,000 people today, which is 20% of our TransHelp base, actually provide and fund, or it could be a family member, don't know, that goes with them. So, and when I look at the other transit agencies across the GTA, the numbers are, well, on a percentage basis, they're comparable to what ours are. So it's nothing new here, but What I will tell you that in fairness, that there is probably some untapped demand here for this type of service, that people that actually would want to join TransHelp if we provide that service. But we've told them that our service is essentially capped at the levels that Council directed us at in 2016. But in fairness to Council Vincente, my opinion would be a guess. To be honest with you, because every family is different and they've got their own financial and family constraints, and it wouldn't be fair for me to take a guess and represent their personal situations.
Okay, thank you. Just during our discussions in committee, it just was felt that given the situation, the expansion of the requirements legislation, we are doing what we can, but also perhaps families need to provide also support for their family members who need this. And so it's a shared responsibility between us as the region and the community.
Absolutely, Chair, absolutely. I just can't tell you what their financial constraints are or not, but I agree that the needs there, they would have to find their own solution. It's just not to me to decide what those trade-offs are or what that capacity for them to do it is, but they would have to find a way to meet us in the middle. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's my list of speakers. I would add the following. Alan, you've hit on all the high notes. We struggled with it for 3 hours. This is a very tough, distasteful decision to make. My comment to my colleagues is get used to them. More of them are coming. What happened here was others in this segment, others in this space have realized this is an ugly, open-ended equation with people, God bless them, living longer and requiring more care. Our service delivery partners have walked away. That's why this started, because they can see where this is going. So now we're left with a two-tier system. And do we want to carry it on? Well, that's inherently unfair. That's the point that was made. But I can solve it with $15 million and be the only entity in the GTA that provides a level of care above and beyond what's required. So if I'm listening and reading the headline tomorrow, what I say, what a place that region of Peel. They'll look after my mother, my father, myself, and they'll give me a caregiver that'll get me to my travels every day. And by God, I think I'm going to sign up for affordable housing there or subsidized housing as well, because Peel's the place you want to be. And your 15 million will become 30 million. At least you've been fair to everybody. The fine point that I would make that resonated with me was, in so doing, you will get out of your core business and help the core folks that need TransHelp to go to work, to go to a social event from time to time just so they can be with people, because the money's got to come from somewhere, unless you write the $15 million check. That'll be 30 million real quick. That'll be 100 million real quick if we want to provide this enhanced level of service. So this is what Councillor Vincente and I struggled with. I think we both came, I don't want to put words in his, we came to the conclusion, like, there really is no option B unless our friends from the province step up and say that's a level of service we wish to provide, because no one else in the GTA is providing it, and they will all come down to us. And I conclude with this, and it will jeopardize our core service for people that might be using TransHelp to get to work, because something's got to give on another front. So Alan, you've synthesized it beautifully, but I don't know that we have many other options other than option 2. With that, if there are no other speakers, the staff recommendation is before you, or any other that anyone would like to make. I need a mover and a seconder or a motion before the chair. Councillor Vincente is moving the staff recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thompson, that's very kind of you to step up and fighting the good fight. So my mover is Councillor Vincente. My seconder is Mayor Thompson, that the staff transition all current passenger assistance program, passengers to TransHelp, and move to discontinue the program effective June 30, 2019, and further that the contract document 2018-759 and for the provision of the program services for TransHelp between the Region of Peel and Cairns Community Centre be extended in the estimated amount of $350,000, excluding applicable taxes, for a total contract commitment of $1.1 million, excluding applicable taxes, for the continuation of the program until June 30th, 2019, in accordance with the Procurement Bylaw 30/2018. You've heard the resolution. I need a recorded vote. If you'd press your buttons at this time, please. Mayor Crombie? That carries unanimously, and the chair would have supported same for all the reasons we've discussed. Thank you to all. That brings me to item 8.3, Public Health Introduction and 2014-2019 Strategic Priority Status Report for information presentation by Dr. Jessica Hopkins, our Medical Officer of Health. Welcome, Jessica.
So good morning, everyone. Today I'm speaking to you as Regional Councillor in your role as the Board of Health for the Region of Peel. And today's presentation is part of a mandated requirement for orientation and ongoing continuing education for board members. So what I'm going to do is start with a brief 2-minute video that describes Region of Peel Public Health, followed by some slides that cover public health's role and work.
Practitioners, researchers, and change makers. We work closely with Canada's healthcare system, but we're different. Healthcare treats people who are already sick. Our goal is to stop people from getting sick in the first place. We do this by focusing on conditions that can affect the overall health of our region's population. Here are the ways we improve and protect your health. Our analysts and health promoters use research and data to promote policies that make healthier choices easy for everyone. For example, Peel Public Health works with planners to design communities where it's easier to be physically active. This is key to preventing new cases of diabetes and other chronic diseases that are Peel's leading causes of illness. Our communicable disease services, immunization, and sexual health clinics help prevent disease and illnesses from spreading. Family health programs help set children up for a great start, while oral health clinics make essential dental care more accessible to everyone who needs it. Our health inspectors help ensure that restaurants, spas, and other personal service specialists are applying proper hygiene and food preparation practices. They also ensure that water we drink and use for recreation is safe. Our environmental health team monitors pests that can spread diseases like West Nile virus. We also monitor air quality and work with partners to promote policies that make it better. We respond during times of crisis. We conduct regular public health surveillance and are trained to anticipate and manage health threats caused by severe weather, disease, or other public health emergencies in Peel. Public health is managed by regional government. This positions us for strong partnerships with local municipalities and other departments at the Region of Peel. We also have productive relationships with our local health integration networks, conservation authorities, healthcare, Peel workplaces, school boards, and more. Join us in our commitment to working with our partners and working with you to protect the health and well-being of people in Peel.
So within Peel, the Board of Health is Regional Council, and this is described in the Health Protection and Promotion Act. The Health Protection and Promotion Act essentially lays out the requirements for programs and services that boards of health need to deliver. It also describes the role of the Medical Officer of Health. So under the Act, I'm required to report directly to the Board of Health on issues of public health emergencies and the programs and services delivered under the Act or any other relevant legislation. I also provide direction to the public health staff. I'm the main spokesperson on public health issues, and I work collaboratively with the Commissioner of Health Services in terms of achieving Board of Health approved directions. So public health uses a population health approach, and I think most of you will be really familiar with what we talk about when we say downstream service delivery. So that's if you visit your family doctor, you go to an emergency department, that's where you're getting help, is downstream. But what I want to talk about is the public health approach, which is looking upstream. And so I want you to imagine you're at the edge of this river, and you see a person floating downstream in this river, and they're at risk for drowning. You help them out, get them to safety. So that's really downstream, you've helped them out. Then you have a look and you see 10 more people coming down the river at risk for drowning. You safely get them out of the river, but you decide, you know what, maybe I should go and figure out why all these people are coming down the river. So you take a walk and you get to the midstream and you see a school there. And you think, wow, maybe I can teach the children and the teachers there about safety around rivers, about maybe how you get across a river safely using a bridge. And that's a midstream intervention where you'd look at decreasing exposure risk. Then you walk even further upstream, and you get to the very top of the stream, and you see there's a bridge there, but the bridge is broken. And so what you might do at that stage is develop policy that requires ongoing maintenance and repair of bridges. And that's the kind of upstream work that public health engages in. And while we deliver services across all of these levels, we tend to focus on upstream and midstream, whereas our colleagues in hospitals and in primary care tend to focus more downstream. So you saw this picture in the video. These are the core public health functions. And if you have looked at the report that was included in today's agenda, Appendix 1 really focuses on some of the achievements in 2018 that public health met under all of these areas. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I did want to highlight a few things that I think are important for you to know. And these are some important gains that we've made in Peel over time. So since 1986, our death rates have decreased and life expectancy has increased. We've also had decreased death rates for many cancers, such as breast and lung cancer. The incidence and death rates for heart disease and stroke have also decreased. We are also very lucky to have high immunization rates here in Peel. And while public health can certainly not take credit for everything to do with these achievements, we are a very important part of this picture. Appendix 2 in the report describes the Ontario Public Health Standards Public Health Accountability Frameworks for Boards of Health. So this is essentially your mandated accountability to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. And as staff, we take these requirements very seriously on your behalf, and we see them as an opportunity and really use them as an opportunity for continuous improvement. So we are mandated by the province to submit a strategic plan for public health, annual service plans, performance and annual reports, as well as other requirements. And just be reassured that Peel Public Health is doing very well in terms of performance and compliance. In addition, I want to flag for you that the Board of Health is also required to conduct a self-evaluation process related to board governance every other year. And so we will be bringing a report to you later in the year on how we will support you to meet that requirement. Public health is good return on impact. So for every dollar that's spent in immunizing children with measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the healthcare system saves $16. For every dollar that we invest in tobacco prevention programs, we save $20 in future healthcare costs. For those of you who have sat around this table for a while, this figure is not going to be a surprise for you. It's something you've seen and dealt with before. So public health as a sector is significantly underfunded in the healthcare system. So if you look at total Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care budget, we are less than 2%, and this has decreased over time. When I started in public health, we were closer to 3%. But Peel itself is underfunded relative to other public health units. And so back in 2013, Peel was in fact identified as being the health unit with the lowest per capita funding among health units in Ontario. And I appreciate all of the work that Council has done over time to advocate for Peel's fair share of funding. Currently, the province covers only 63% of cost-shared programs instead of the 75% that it's mandated to fund. So we do have resource constraints, and in order to best deal with those, Peel Public Health has really looked to strategic planning and identifying areas of focus to best achieve impact for the population. And so the current program priorities are living tobacco-free, supportive environments for healthy living, and nurturing the next generation. And these fall under the thriving area of focus of the Region of Peel Strategic Plan. We also have infrastructure priorities, and these are focused on internal capacity building so that we can support staff to deliver on the program priorities as well as all of our routine operations. And those fall under the living and leading areas of focus of the Region of Peel Strategic Plan. So I told you what our priorities are. This slide tells you about what we've actually accomplished in terms of some of our priority areas. So the first is living tobacco-free. This is a real success story for the Region of Peel and something that we should be very proud of collectively. There's been a significant decline in current cigarette smokers from 2001 to 2013 to 2014, and we are significantly lower than the rest of the province in this area. But we know work is not done. Youth initiation is still a concern, particularly with e-cigarettes and vaping. Supportive environments for healthy living. This is an area we know we still have a lot of work to do. So over half of Peel residents are inactive in their leisure time, and 62% of residents do not eat adequate fruits and vegetables. And we know that these are significant risk factors for diabetes, which is a concern in our region, and so we're going to continue work in this area. And then nurturing the next generation focuses on families and children. And 67% of mothers who start breastfeeding continue to do so by 6 months. And that's in alignment with the current recommendations to breastfeed for 6 months and beyond. So we're doing well, but there's still a way for us to go. So we'll continue work in that area as well. I'm not going to read through this slide, but I did want to remind you that most of the outcomes that public health is looking to achieve cannot be achieved by public health alone. And so we work very collaboratively with partners, including those in the region of Peel, local municipalities, healthcare organizations, and school boards. So some key challenges looking ahead, and we will certainly be bringing reports over the coming term of council in these areas to bring you up to speed and help you to understand where you might be able to have most impact. But mental well-being has certainly been identified as a concern in the community. Substance use, for example, opioids, while we know our rates continue to be below those of the rest of the province, they have increased significantly over time. So that's an area we want to keep an eye on. Health impacts of climate change, complete communities for active living and healthy eating, and reducing health inequities. So in terms of looking ahead for 2019, we know that given the current political environment, we expect funding restraints to be of ongoing concern. We will be bringing a comprehensive health status report probably early in spring, to tell you more about what the health status looks like in Peel region. We're also actively working on developing our 2020 to 2030 strategic plan, and we'll be coming to you with further information on the work that's happened to date and the consultations that have occurred to inform that plan. And then community safety and well-being. You heard about this most recently at the January 10th council meeting, and there will be ongoing updates about that as well. So that concludes my orientation session. I'm happy to answer questions, and if there are councillors who would like a more in-depth orientation, I'm very happy to meet with you separately.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. I have a list. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Hopkins, for your presentation. I guess I can't go into the report now, can I? Okay, thank you. And I'm just looking at the provincial funding for public health. And I guess one of the things that troubles me is that we're one of the lowest funded public health units in Ontario. We're one of the fastest growing regions in Ontario. We have a number of challenges facing us here in Peel region, and we have no funding from the province, or not enough funding for the province to do all the things that you need to do and all the programs you need to have there for the public. And one of the things I think we've always focused on, and I think in public health, is prevention. So if you can stop it before it gets to the point where you need to cure it, it's a much cheaper way to do it, and a better way to do it. So I'm not sure what we do with this, but I think that while we're going to the province to say, reduce, we don't support what we just talked about with the DCs, we really need to be going to the province to say, we need your help, we need you to provide some more funding to help us do what we need to do, because it's very important to keep people healthy. Without people being healthy, well, they can't go to work. And certainly you can't go to work, well, that's not going to be good for the economy. So I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, what we do with this, but I think that we do need to knock on the province's door and ask for more funding. We are a very large region in Ontario, so I'll leave it with you. And when the report does come forward, I'll be happy to move that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Hopkins, for coming in today. And first, I want to say thank you for being one of the first people to meet with us regarding Brampton's active transportation investment recently passed a couple of weeks ago with support from the mayor, of course. I want to echo Councillor Grove's comments about being one of the lowest funding regions when it comes to public health and healthcare in general. And I'm wondering, I have a couple questions talking about proactive programs. Just a quick update on, from you, what we're doing on our epidemic around obesity and diabetes in the region. And also, do we have any statistics or information that shows the return on investment in regards to public health and the savings on the healthcare system when we take a proactive stance? Thank you.
Through the chair, so with respect to return on investment, yes, there's data, and it's, in fact, there's been data that's been published in peer-reviewed journals about the return on investment for different public health interventions, and that's certainly something we could use if council is interested in further advocacy with the province to support the position. With respect to the question about what are we doing related to healthy weights and diabetes, so we have a number of different strategies and programs that are in place. So the first I will mention is a collaborative partnership we have with the Central West LHINs. School boards, City of Brampton is involved in that as well, and it's working together on the Healthy Communities Initiative. So it targets different settings, including schools, places of worship, to promote healthy eating and physical activity. We also have a Healthy Pledge program with the schools, and we've had over 250 schools sign on to the Healthy Pledge program, which supports healthy eating and physical activity. We have a network that we work with related to active transportation to and from schools, supporting active school transit planning. And then in the early years, the work that we do with respect to breastfeeding and supporting mothers to have healthy weights following pregnancy and in between pregnancies as well. So we have a number of different programs, but we're always looking to do more in this area because we do know that it's a significant issue here in Peel.
So I appreciate that, and thank you, because I think sometimes the proactive stance in dealing with diseases like that, you don't see it until the very end. And then I have one final question, and that is in regards to precarious work and the increase of precarious work. These are employees who don't have health benefits, don't have the same access to health care that many full-time employees have. We've seen an increase in the number of warehouses and logistics places that have a tendency to hire more precarious workers, and wondering if public health does anything in that regard to help those residents of our community.
So through the chair, so public health does work to try and decrease inequities that exist. That is not a specific population that we have worked with in the past. However, we are really embarking on a new health equity strategy, building competency in our staff to identify populations that might be at increased need. So I'd certainly be interested in discussing with you what you know of the area and seeing whether or not there's something we could look at for this group.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions on the report, but just an observation listening to members of council indicating on past work done to advocate to the province for our fair share, and further to Councillor Sinclair's question earlier, if members of council could see what kind of work has been done in the past to advocate for Peel's fair share, at the same time that we're asking staff to come back to us with how behind the eight ball that campaign was orchestrated. If that's possible, that would be very appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd be happy to do that. I can tell you it's a pretty thick file, because we've been beat up over the years in terms of our fair share, and we've had task force and committee, and all I can tell you is it's not going to get better until we keep pounding away. And that gives me a marvelous segue, because it's wonderful to welcome Mayor Brown, who's already been on top of the file, I guess, after his first look at how bad the books are when Peel is compared to everywhere else. And so you're next up, Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. So the stat that we have the lowest funding for a health unit in the province, is that based on per capita?
Through the chair, yes. So this is based on per capita.
And where does that statistic come from?
In terms of how was it
On
calculated?
the funding, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of, so the public health unit funding is available publicly for all health units in Ontario. There are currently 35 of them. And then there is the information that we have from census data, for example, on populations. And so that's how that number is calculated.
Okay, great. Now, when you talk about having the lowest funding, it's always important to remember what that means for residents. So if we had the provincial average in funding, so if we were treated like everyone else, what type of services would you be able to provide to better the health outcomes of residents in Peel Region? What type of services are you not able to provide that if you had the funding that made sense, you'd be able to?
So through the chair, we would work in conjunction with the Board of Health to determine which services you would like to prioritize. But based on our data, for example, workplaces are often a setting where we have interest in supporting healthy living, and so physical activity, healthy eating. There are literally thousands of workplaces in the region of Peel, and we have a team that has, I believe, 5 members on it. So clearly we can't get out to every workplace and support them. So we could increase our reach in that way. As well, some of our services do have wait times associated with them, and we would like to be able to decrease the wait times with those. So for example, sometimes our immunization clinics have wait times associated with them, and so people need to wait longer in order to get into them. And immunization can often be something that people choose to do all of a sudden, and if they put it off, it's very easy to continue putting off. So those are some of the things that we could look at doing. But we would have to have conversations with council about where you would like to increase service levels.
Are there any programs that are offered in other health units that, due to the financial position we are in, we're not able to offer? So it would be a specific health program offered in another health unit that is not an option here in Peel?
Yeah, so through the chair, there are some different ones. I'll give you one example. So there is a new requirement under the Ontario Public Health Standards that public health units are to deliver on vision screening for children in kindergarten. There was no funding attached to this when it came out in 2018, and there are health units delivering that. So we are actually coming back to you with a report related to that, saying that we're recommending, in fact, not doing the work the way that the ministry has asked us to do it because we don't have the funding for it.
That's a great example. Is there another one that you could illustrate to council?
Yeah, so through the chair, for example, the Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program, that is a family home visiting program for children in the early months of life for higher risk families. So children who might be vulnerable for not growing and developing as we would want to optimize for them. The program funding for that program has been frozen for more than 10 years. And so we are not able to get to all families. So we, in fact, tighten up our eligibility criteria to stay within the funding envelope for that. And so with further funding in that area, we could provide service to more families.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you. Through you to the Medical Officer of Health. I see here Ontario Public Health Standards Accountability Framework and all this stuff about monitoring and reporting and so on. How do we compare? Is there any comparison with other health organizations at the regional or county level? And how do we rate compared to them? Or does this all just disappear into the province and no one hears about it?
So through the chair, so there are targets that are set for our accountability agreement indicators. And what we do see is that Peel, by and large, we are doing well on our accountability agreement indicators, meeting our targets. And we do see from the ministry results of other health units, although they're not always named, sometimes they're anonymized, but we can see where we fall within the scale. And currently, we are doing well. Over time, if the funding is not increased, we will need to look at service levels, and we may not do as well in some of the areas in future, but currently we are doing well.
All right. I guess I've been watching the provincial government over some decades gradually turning themselves into the Central Politburo. You shall meet targets, right? But are the targets realistic? Is my rhetorical question, I guess. Because there's very easy to set targets and then sit back and watch everyone else squirm. And I can remember again going back to the Harris years saying, well, if you don't do this or that, we'll pull your funding. So I guess I'm concerned with accountability going in the other direction to the province. Thank you.
I think, and that was my last speaker, I think from the flavor of the conversation, I'm thinking there's enough here that there's a direction to staff for the following. I'm asking. I think between Mayor Brown's comments and Councillor Vincente's, I think the direction to staff may very well be, can you give us a history on how we got here? I don't want the whole history, not at this time, to come back, because it's painful. And it's a long 30, but I think the whole group needs to know what were our best efforts to try and change it, what programs, initiatives that we had over the years. It'll bring us to what is the state of affairs today, along Mayor Brown's line of questioning. What are we getting per capita? What are the specific programs that are going wanting? When you look to the future, where are the big ticking time bombs that we have to deal with? And that can come back to council, and when we have the full totality of why we are where we are, where we've gotten here and what the future looks like, I think we need the fulsome discussion then to say, what is our renewed plan of attack? I think that, I'm hoping, Mayor Brown, if you'd be happy to move that direction to staff, and Councillor Vincente to second that, this needs to come back because it will be one of the biggest issues, if not the largest, we have going forward. So that would be, I believe, the direction of my two colleagues and Councillor Sinclair as well, for a much larger discussion when some harder data and a bigger picture of the cataclysm facing us can be quantified, and we'll have to decide where we go forward. So if that is acceptable and I have no other speakers, I think I can just give that as, in fact, I think maybe a motion. Yeah, let's vote. That is the motion is, mover is Mayor Brown, the seconder is Councillor Vicente, and it should be a motion because it's something that needs to come back, and it's time to join the battle again. With that, I think I've sort of verbally given you the flavor of the motion. I hope you will take that as the motion itself, and you're called upon to vote by pushing your buttons, of course. And we're almost, are we home, Madam Clerk? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Looking forward to that coming back. Okay, with that, that concludes all of our staff presentations. I'm now down to the items that were not dealt with through consent. The first being item 9.4, application by Seafood City Supermarket for exemption under the Retail Business Holiday Act for holiday openings, 800 Boyer Boulevard, City of Mississauga, Ward 11. Councillor Kovacs, you asked that it be held, but my first speaker on my list is Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Paleshi?
I'm the chair of the committee, isn't it my?
Oh, my apologies. Yes.
Okay.
Back to you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Welcome, members of council, to the items related to planning and growth management. Our only item was held by Councillor Kovac, application by Seafood City Supermarket for exemption under the Retail Business Holiday Act for holiday openings, 800 Boyer Boulevard, City of Mississauga, Ward 11. Councillor Kovac.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, wanted to provide comment. I think it's a tremendous get for the City of Mississauga to have landed Seafood City Supermarket. I know so many members of the community who have expressed that excitement, and really just a tremendous get. I continue to feel, though, that it's a bit of a leap to make the claim that a supermarket can be a tourist attraction. In the past term, we did leap a few times. We leapt for Yuan Ming. I think that was in 2016, and then succeeding that was PAT Oriental Food Market in 2017. So I'd like to remain consistent with my viewpoint. I think regional council will want to remain the same in that since we have gifted a few of the others, it would be awfully inconsistent to go and halt now while we're reviewing a very similarly structured organization. But at the time I had expressed concern that it would set a precedent. I believe that is carrying about. I also had expressed worry that employees would be pressured to work on holidays. I continue to feel worried about that. So I want to remain consistent. I'm going to be voting no on this, but I imagine that others will take a different position. I would respect that. Thank you.
Councillor Kovac, are you, you're not support of the recommendation, do you want to amend the recommendation to not grant them? Would you like to move that? Okay. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So as the first Filipino councillor elected in Peel Region, this is a very large Filipino supermarket. There are 67,000 Filipinos in the region and growing, 20,000 of which are in Brampton, not in Mississauga. This is a huge get. I've gone to Seafood City because it is the only Filipino supermarket that's nearby in the GTA for me, and it is a growing Filipino community in the region. And I've been there, and there are lineups. It is packed, there are lineups. So I just wanted to support the idea of extending the hours. Whether or not it is a tourist attraction, certainly for the Filipino community it is. And so I would ask my colleagues around the table to support the recommendations going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Parrish.
I'm not going to speak for or against it right now. I just want to get some clarification. I thought we had a huge debate on this 6-8 months ago before the election. And I thought we took a position as a council because we had so many employees groups coming to talk to us that we weren't going to approve any more of these.
Through the chair, so to clarify, yes, when we brought recommendations forward on the new bylaw about what we would accept, we were suggesting no further approvals unless it was in the local municipality's designated tourism area. And we grandfathered in the ones that had been existing, and council's directed us to review that grandfathering, and we're coming back in April. That same bylaw, when we brought that report forward, we said for applications that were in the queue already, they would be assessed, to be fair, by the old regime. So this is those exemptions around tourism, et cetera, et cetera. And so in assessing it against that old regime, it does fit, you know, the criteria. What'll happen, though, is if you approve it, when that report comes in April, it will be considered a grandfathered one, and that could change depending on our feedback we get from the consultations and the options we present to council in April. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that'd be highly unfair to approve them and then not approve them in a 6-week flip over or however long it's going to take. I was one of the ones that said we should go back and review the ones that have already been approved and take them off the list. I love markets like this. I think they're fantastic. But 7 days out of the year, I think you could close them. They have huge volumes of people coming through. We have some down in Mississauga, like Adonis, that it's jam-packed all the time because it has a lot of Middle Eastern food. But if they know it's going to be closed for 7 days out of 365, I think people get their shopping done. So I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Councillor Russ.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would agree with both Councillor Kovac and Councillor Parrish. I guess in my notes when I was reading this the other day, I struggle with the recommendation to approve, but they may be grandfathered. I think that's not very fair to the business. I also don't think that this is a tourism destination. There's so many opportunities over the course of the year to visit and to enjoy this supermarket among many others in the area. And until such time that the city of Mississauga would designate the Heartland area potentially as a tourism area, then we can take a look at that. So I think given the state that we're in, it's premature, and I will not be supporting the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. I won't be supporting it either. I think it's an amazing store. But I also have Nations in my ward, which also is a huge attraction and is busy every single day of the week. And I know that they would like to be designated to be open as well as other similar types of stores around the city. We will not be designating our tourist districts. It's on the agenda of our May Tourism Board meeting. And once the Tourism Board has discussed the districts, it still has to go to council. So our council will probably not be deliberating on that at least until the end of May and possibly into June, depending on what happens at the May meeting of the Tourism Board. And as we're going to be presenting our full tourism strategy at that time. So it would be premature for the region to revisit this in April, as you said, because we will not have the information from the city of Mississauga by that time. You know, and because they're going to, they would be grandfathered, I think to give someone, if at that time we do not designate it as a tourist district, to grandfather and then say, but you can only have it for maybe 6 months, and then you may not meet the criteria and it's going to be gone. I don't think that's fair to the organization. So for those reasons and for others, because I do believe that 7 days out of the year retail can remain closed, and it has been shown when we had the retailer employees come before us that, the stores it's not like all of a sudden if they're open on a holiday that they get more business. It's just that people that might shop the day before are going to spread it out over the 3 days of a weekend rather than the 2. But the actual revenue that comes in is really not that much more. So I don't think it's going to impact overly on their bottom line.
So members of council, there's seems to be maybe an appetite to refer this staff report back to staff to align it with the April report, but also have staff discuss with the area municipalities for their future reports that align with the exemptions and the tourist studies that are coming out of Mississauga for May and June. Is there an appetite to have this referred back? I'm seeing yeses. All in favor? I need a mover of that.
I'll move it.
Councillor DeBerla?
Will tell us how to proceed.
It's a deferral that you're looking for, just to the date in April, the same date that they're bringing back the report on the new processes.
So I don't want to attach a date to it because there's things coming out of Mississauga that aren't clear on when they're coming out. So have staff refer this back to staff, have staff discuss with the area municipalities and align it with their reports coming out of the cities. So I didn't want to attach a date to it. And recorded vote. All in favor?
You just need your mover and seconder as well.
Councillor Demera, Councillor Rouse. That carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, with my apologies. Now we're on to items related to enterprise programs and services. Chair Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So item 11.1 and 11.12 relating to each other were held by Councillor Sato. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's really hard to deal with 8.1 before 8.2. Because 8.2 is the report that is showing what the region charges. And I have a lot of concerns with, so I'm going to be speaking mainly to
11.1.
8.2. 11, I'm sorry, 11, thank you. I really question the fact that it's costing the region what it is to administer mobile signs. $48 per sign per placement, I think is absolutely ridiculous, and clearly we're doing something wrong. We administer our bookings of mobile signs in my office. It takes me maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes to write the sign on the form. It then takes my staff maybe another 5 minutes to take the form and send it by email to the sign company with the details as to when and where and all of that. Payment is done by the credit card. It's seamless. So, and I'm certainly not paying my staff, for 20 minutes time, $48 for spending 15 to 20 minutes. I just think it's absolutely ludicrous. And that was my question on the whole program as to whether or not we even should be doing it in-house. A couple of questions. It doesn't say what the entire budget for the department is. Jeanette, how many staff are in the department? Because I recall a few years ago in budget, we added 2 additional staff to administer 1,800 signs.
Through the chair, right now, there are 2 staff assigned to this mobile sign program. One does the more physical work of like moving the signs around, or if they're staying in similar locations, going and driving around Peel to change the messages from Caledon all the way down to the lake. They may do some other duties on the side, but that's their main function. The second person does do the coordination, so whether it's a member of council or someone from public health, someone from roads, whatever, they kind of coordinate, sometimes have to prioritize who gets what because people may want it at the same time. First and foremost, it's designated for waste, to get waste messages out.
Okay. What's the budget for the department?
The overall waste management budget?
No, the budget for the signs, for the 2 staff, what's the budget? What are we spending on staffing?
Oh, sorry, I should have that in front of me, and I don't.
Okay. Based on the costing that staff got, and I'm surprised how high that cost is, because if you were being quoted by private companies $125 and you were going to have 1,800 signs, the city of Mississauga pays $85, but we only have a contract for 800 signs through the year. So I would have thought that if you were giving someone a bigger contract, that the cost would go down. So, I'm really surprised at the numbers that are here, because going through the numbers with our city staff, and we have about half as many signs, but we're also spending almost half as much to administer it, because when I asked staff, what's the administration cost, and they said, oh, it's so minimal, we don't even add it on. And they weren't even able to pull that up because it was not a big time-consuming process. So I really think that there could be a lot more efficiencies in the department rather than spending $50 administration cost and staff cost on signage. And I do think that we should be pursuing again externally. If it is costing us that much, then I think we should be pursuing that externally. I mean, I worked it out that if you, the admin cost for that number of signs is almost $100,000 a year, and the cost of the signs is $180,000 a year if you based it on these numbers here. So you're spending an additional 50% of the total cost of the program to administer the program, which seems to be extremely high. And not knowing, that isn't, I don't know what the staff costs are, all the, how you work that out. But I would like this to be, I'd like it to be reviewed with in a lot more detail than what we have here today, with the exact costs for the division and what we actually are spending. And I'd also like you to go back out and talk to the private contractors and see why, I don't see why you can't get the same price that the city of Mississauga does. And I know that Brampton doesn't charge permit fees. Mississauga does. Now, Mississauga, there is no permit fee for a sign for a member of council. So you can't include that permit fee in with the charge back to council because we don't pay for one. We still need the permit. It still gets processed through, but there is no charge back to council. So the costings that are here, I do have some concerns with. And so with 11.2, I would like to refer that back to staff to bring back a report with a lot more detail in it and a full review of the program, and go back out and, right now we're contracted with Big Mobile Sign and we're getting $85 and they're quoting you $125. And for double the number of signs, I think there's something wrong with that. And, we have asked our staff whether we should be charging the region permit fees. At the city, it was determined that staff recommend that they still want to continue to do that. I know Brampton doesn't. So I think maybe that's another conversation that could be held for the future. I'm not sure what the financial impact on the city is. I didn't do those numbers. So again, I'm just going to move receipt of both of the reports and refer back to more detail.
So Councillor Shay, with direction, moving receipt, but with direction to get more detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to say that, personally, this doesn't really impact me because I can get a sign for $85, and I have been. I'm not going to pay the region internally $145, and that really bothers me because I'm using my region budget to pay an outside company where I could be just flowing the money through and keeping it inside the region, which would be my preference. But I'm also very frugal when I spend my budget, and I'm not going to inflate my budget if I don't have to. So I'm going to go with the cheapest price I can get for the same level of service, and that's going to be an outside provider. So I think this is kind of all backfiring on us using internal services, but keeping it affordable for members of council.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no one further on the board, we have to do recorded vote on this.
You'll need a seconder as well, and then we'll have a recorded vote for referring both 11.1 and 11.2 back to staff for further report.
Okay, seconded by, Councillor Ross is now on the board.
Sorry, I did have some questions on 11.2, so if we're voting on them together, I just wanted to, I agree with putting them back to staff. I'm not too sure about the effectiveness of having those additional signs installed at 10 Peel Centre Drive and 7120 here Ontario Street, given the amount of money that we're spending. I'm just not too sure how effective they're going to be, so please keep that in mind as we refer these back. Thank you. I will second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion of receipt and referral by Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor Ross. All in favor? Recorded vote. And it passes. Thank you very much, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That brings us, under communication, Councillor Francis, I think it's back to you, item
You're right.
12.1, required directions, so I'll let you deal with that as well, please. Item 12.1.
Correct. So, Rob, this is communication from Rob Flack, the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair Association, with direction required. We are deemed an association member for 2019, and we need to name a representative.
And if I could, Councillor Fonseca, Chair Fonseca, when I sat along there, I always had the privilege of nominating Mayor Thompson, who served us so well and has done a marvelous job. And I would think that would be an automatic, but I will leave it to others to, but he served us well and they love having him there and he means a lot to them. So I'm just that suggestion if someone would like to move that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Groves?
You took the words right out of my mouth, and so I'm happy to nominate Mayor Thompson.
So we have a mover and we need a seconder. Second by Councillor McFadden. That Mayor Thompson be appointed as the representative to the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair. You can vote now. And if, anyone else? There's still a few outstanding. Councillor McFadden, can you hit the vote? Recorded vote, you seconded the motion. Can you? Okay. Congratulations. Okay, thank you. Now back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And with that, that brings us to items related to Public Works. Chair Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. We have one item on the agenda, and that's 13.2, laboratory sample analysis services on as required basis, document number 2019-03N. It's here for recommendation. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I fully support the recommendation. I do have a question on page 2 of the report. It said the number of samples analyzed under the existing contract has risen from 46,000 per year from 2012 to over 147 samples per year in 2017. So in terms of what is driving those numbers and driving up our costs, is it possible to get a better breakdown of where is I know it's not just water and wastewater, it's also soil sampling, but I'm wondering if at some point, and it doesn't have to be right now, that we can get a better breakdown of what is driving those costs?
Through the chair, I can bring that back. I do have kind of a list of how much each program charges. So from a relative standpoint, I could whip that out and run through it right now, or I can send something out, whatever works
It's
best.
my own personal curiosity, so whatever
Okay.
works for you. would be
All right,
great.
thank you.
I'll move the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Raz, and it's seconded by Councillor Santos. All those in favor, it's a recorded vote. Yep, so let's push our button. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. That concludes Public Works. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and well done all. That brings us to item 19, other business. Seeing no other business. Item 20, notice of motion. We have one, 20.1, motion from Councillor Groves regarding Highway 427 extension to Highway 9 and beyond. Councillor Thompson on that notice of motion.
I would
Mayor
like to
Thompson, my
I'll
apologies.
second it.
Very good. It's been seconded, it's duly before us, and that will be coming back on the next appropriate agenda.
No, it's for hearing to do.
Oh, I apologize, carry on.
Yeah.
So we received it as a motion for today, very good. Councillor Groves, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Anika. My community actually has discussed this, and I know Caledon Council in the past, we've discussed it. This current council in Caledon also talked about the need for this extension of Highway 427, really to deal with a number of things, traffic safety, safety on our roads, goods movement, and it just makes sense to take it to Highway 9. So this is the reason that I'm bringing it here, and hopefully we can get the province to listen to us and just continue on up to Highway 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
I agree, and this is something that's very important to council at Caledon as well as our community as well. Also, the industry is needs accesses, and our regional roads and our town roads are being heavily consumed by goods movement traffic just because they don't have an access to the 427. The 427 EA was completed back in the late 90s, so it doesn't mean the EA is good today, but a lot of the work has already been done to do this, and originally it was to go to Highway 89. So for what Councillor Groves is asking here, I think is timely. It's a new government. We need to relook and refocus, and it's about, with all the growth that's coming, it's impacting all of us through Peel, and it's adding to your dollars as well. So I think this is something that's very responsible to be asking for.
Very good. Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, we've got a major problem with 400 series highways, or useful highways for goods moving vehicles moving north out of the GTA. And Highway 10 is completely oversubscribed going through Caledon Village. We're probably over 40,000 vehicles per day through the village, and it's a bottleneck there. And it's one of the few routes up over the escarpment, which is a major barrier. Airport Road is plugged up, not a very useful route, but it's being used for heavy goods movement vehicles. And that leaves us with 427. I see Councillor Groves is advocating for Highway 9. I'd say 89 should be the terminus. And if we had that 400 series route hitting Highway 9 and then 89, that would provide an access for vehicles to then head westerly across through large areas of northern Ontario there. Basically, the vehicles going through Caledon Village service everything from Caledon Village around to Godrich. And in the summer, when the Chi-Chi-Mon ferry is running, they go all the way up through the Bruce and take that into northern Ontario. So it's a need. Thank you.
Thank you. The suggestion I would have, and I got ahead of myself, I understand the motion. I think it's something that's very important before us. But in consultation with staff, I think it might be appropriate if we did this based upon a report to come back so as to ensure it aligns with our other initiatives and we are consistent to the province. So if the mover and the seconder would allow that to go back to staff, bring us back the report, understand all the moving parts, and then we can vote accordingly. Would that be acceptable, Councillor Groves and Mayor Thompson? Very good. So the motion is before us to be referred back to staff for a report, and then we can carry on from there. Commissioner Smith?
Through the chair, we're happy to bring back a report. I will also add that on March 1st, we have, with this term of council, our first Good Movements Task Force, and we have asked the Ministry of Transportation to give us an update exactly on this issue. So we'll continue to raise it at the same time we'll prepare the report.
Thank you. And that's brought me a new list, Councillors Pelletier and Groves. Councillor Pelletier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to know if the report would be a little bit more all-encompassing and with the effect of, Highway 10. I know Highway 10 it's always been a disaster. It's been a nightmare for traffic. But the 410, the extension of 410, 413, Highway 9, and if that report is going to be kind of all that detailed.
I'm through to the Commissioner.
Yeah, we're happy to make it more comprehensive, looking at all the provincial highways in Peel and what's the status and where they're at and what we would recommend as staff based on traffic movement patterns, congestion, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you. While I understand and appreciate that we want to refer it back to staff, I'm confused because over the past 4 years, I know government relations advocated strongly on this point. This was something that every time we went with the Minister of Transportation, we discussed. We discussed it with the new Minister of Transportation last year at AMO, and it's something that this council continued to advocate. It was part of our policy moving forward. It was approved by previous councils. So by referring it, then I'm assuming that you're thinking that this council may change its direction on what is important moving forward. I am not for referring it. I think that we should be prepared. This council, some of us are heading to OGRA in 2 weeks. We need to have a firm position that we can say that regional council is behind this initiative. This is part of the goods movement. This is not new. It may be new to some of the newer councillors around this table, but this is something we've been advocating for very strongly for as long as I've been on council and even before that. So I'm not, it's great that we already know that a report is coming forward and it's already going to be part of that report. I think that we need to have a message today to the province because some of us are going to be meeting with them in 2 weeks, and this definitely should be something that we are advocating for.
Agreed. And Councillor Innes, if I could respond, being a new council, being 8 new members on council, I would hope it would be a reaffirmation of this new council. And as I said, staff has also made it clear there are a lot of moving parts, and we want to make sure what we present aligns so that we don't look like we're contradicting ourselves or talking across purposes. Perhaps that's the best way I can put it. I hope to end up exactly where you've suggested, but I want to make sure we aren't working at cross purposes within our own organization, so to speak, that sort of jeopardizes the cause further out. So that's as best I can put it. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with Councillor Innes. We have been discussing this at the regional table actually for quite some time, for years and years. So I think we are aligned in what's being asked for here, in what previous council has asked for here. So as Councillor Innes says, it is time sensitive. They will be attending OGRA. This is a great time to raise this with the minister. So I really see this as time sensitive, and hopefully council can just move this ahead because Chair Iannico, with all due respect, we have beaten this thing to death over the years here at the regional table. So
I appreciate the comments. With that, I
and
have moved.
sorry. And just one question, and I'm not sure if staff has any concerns with the way the motion's worded or just are having this move forward right now.
Through the chair, no concerns with how the motion's worded.
And we'll be good to move it forward.
It's not going to change our work in bringing back a wholesome report, et cetera. So it's really council's determination if they want a formal position before you go to that meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think it would be a good idea to have a formal position so that you can go with a position when you speak to the minister. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that explanation, so we have the motion properly constituted before me that reads as follows from Councillor Groves and Mayor Thompson. Whereas the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2017 allocates 1.97 million residents and 970,000 jobs to the Region of Peel by 2041. And whereas the Region of Peel has been advocating for the extension of Highway 427 to Highway 9 and beyond to serve long-term transportation needs. And whereas the extension of Highway 427 to Highway 9 and beyond will serve as a catalyst for economic growth, seamless interregional travel, and the safe and efficient movement of people and goods. Therefore, be it resolved that the regional chair requests a meeting with the Minister of Transportation for the purposes of discussing the importance of extending Highway 427 to Highway 9 and beyond. And further, that the Ministry of Transportation be requested to advance the planning, design, and construction of the extension of Highway 427 to Highway 9 and beyond in the 2019 Southern Ontario Highway Program, and further that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to MPP Sylvia Jones for information. You've heard the motion. Recorded vote. And that is carried unanimously, and staff in the normal course will follow up with the reports as was discussed. Very good. Okay, with that, that brings me to bylaws. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Dillon, rather, seconded by Councillor Downey, that the bylaws listed on February 14th, 2019 Regional Council agenda being bylaws 17, 2019 to 20, 2019, inclusive, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. You've heard the motion. All those in favor? That is carried. Brings me to in camera. In terms of managing our time, we have two items in camera. One is personnel. One is the January 10th council, the minutes from the meeting. If no one has any questions for the minutes of the meeting, what I can do is suggest that all that I need now is the people in the room for the in-camera personnel matter, so everybody only gets up once. So does anyone have any questions with regards to one of the two in-camera items, the minutes from the January 20 in-camera, January 10? Seeing none, I think we'll deal with that in the normal course. With that, I'm going to ask that we go in camera now, and the only individuals I need in the room, other than my council colleagues, is the solicitor, our head of HR, and the clerk to start. And we'll get back to it in 2 minutes as we're waiting for the staff to come in. Okay, so let's take I'm just waiting for the CAO to join us. We can proceed with certain. I'm in your charge, Madam Clerk. Okay, the first motion that I have before me from the clerk is that the council waive the rules to proceed with a vote without notice while coming out of the in-camera. It's moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Rass. Recorded vote? Yes. Recorded vote, please. Oh, Madam Clerk?
It's the waiver to deal with the issue that we,
If you'd please vote accordingly now. Recorded vote.
Councillor Dillon is.
Councillor Dillon?
There we go.
Oh, no, don't vote for her. Madam Clerk, that is carried. Thank you. The next motion that I have before me is that direction given in camera to the Director of Human Resources be approved and voted upon in accordance with Section 239, subsection 6B of the Municipal Act as amended. That has been moved by Councillor Rass, seconded by Councillor Parrish. All those in a recorded vote again, please vote accordingly. Madam Clerk? That is carried. Madam Clerk, what else is before the chair? Okay. This is moved by Councillor Vincente, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, that the bylaw 21-2019 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held February 14, 2019, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All those in favor, show of hands. That is carried. Motion to adjourn from Councillor Brown, Mayor Brown, and Councillor Carlson. All those in favor, that is carried. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Valentines.